Stephanie Bellantoni for visiting our school today for your presentation. And I'm Liza Shapiro. I'm the Chappaqua PTA Special Education Chair. And I'm hoping that today you'll find very informative. And then Heidi also wanted to say a few words. I know we have some people that are out of district in the room, but Heidi's going to just give a little update on what's going on in our district.
Good morning, everyone. So typically at these meetings, when we don't have a presentation, we're sitting around a table, so it doesn't feel so much like a presentation for me. But typically I just give a little bit of an update on some of the things that are going on in the world of special education here for us. It's been a really busy fall. We have been doing a lot of professional development. And provided an opportunity for parents also when we had Dr. George McCluskey come in and speak to our parents in the Knowledge Cafe around executive functions. If you had wanted to go to that presentation and weren't able to go, we have also secured him. I am a member of the Lower Hudson Valley Task Force, which is a group of professionals, attorneys, parent advocates, directors of special education. Naomi from WIHD is on the task force as well. And we are bringing Dr. McCluskey back to the area. He will be speaking again on executive functions, and I'll give you a little heads up on that. We're going to be advertising it, but I believe it's November 20th. Is he at those things on the 20th? The evening of November 20th. The evening of November 20th. I think registration is going to be at 6:30, and he's going to start at 7 o'clock up in Putnam, Northern Westchester in Yorktown Heights. So if you had wanted to see him when he was here for our Knowledge Cafe and weren't able to, he has so much information around the topic of executive functions and executive skills and how they impact all of us and impact our students. So that would be a great opportunity for you. So we spoke with the Knowledge Cafe to at least 40 parents here in this room, actually. And then the next day, we provided staff development for all of our staff members here in 3 different sessions. So we spoke to our elementary teachers and teaching assistants, related service providers, and then our middle school and high school. And then there was a 3rd session where we kind of filled the academic commons, and that was a time for teachers and teaching assistants to just ask specific questions and just dig a little deeper with him and with his expertise. So that was wonderful. Also on that day, that wasn't yesterday, that was the last time that you had your children home and we were here improving our practice. There were a lot of other sessions that our teachers went to. Some of them were presented by our teachers, and others by others like Ellen November, who is also well known in the field of technology and using technology. So he was here. So there's been a lot of staff development. Teaching assistants were trained yesterday in a variety of different things. One of the new initiatives that we brought in, thanks to a grant from the foundation, is access for all of our students to co-writer and snap and read. And I truly believe that these, what are they called? Platforms? Platforms can be a game changer for some of our students. Snap and read, anything that's web-based, you can highlight it, bring it down reading levels, change the language, translate it into Chinese or Spanish. I mean, it's amazing. And co-writer is word prediction. So for students who are doing written projects, it predicts their language. It also helps them organize. They are really amazing tools. And so we've been doing a lot of training with our teachers here in district on the use of them. Yesterday, the teaching assistants and teachers were trained here. Ellen Moskowitz, who's one of our special education teachers, has really kind of taken on this assistive technology for us this year, and has really been working with our teachers to find ways to kind of open up access for our students. Because sometimes all you need to do is give our students greater access or greater ability to represent what they know, and they can show us truly what they've learned. So that's really great news. Trying to think of a bunch of things in my mind, and I lost them because I was so excited about that. School year has started well. Everything is up and strong. We're in November already. It's hard to believe. But we're moving right along. Personally, I've been without an assistant for 5 weeks, and I'm struggling a bit, but hopefully I will have a hire by the end of November. And then those of you who have been sending me emails and haven't been getting a response or leaving voicemail message for me and have to try twice will be able to reach me easier. So I apologize if there's been any kind of glitch in my communication with you, because I'm doing her job and my job at the same time right now. Anything else you wanted to share?
The parent advisory.
Thank you. That was on my list. Okay. So in the beginning of the year, I had sent an email out to any parent of a student who has an IEP or a 504 plan about the fact that we started a parent advisory committee. And so we have 10 parents on that committee, all who are volunteering their time. We're meeting about 5 times this year, unless we need to meet more. And the committee is really serving on multiple purposes, but really to not only share information to Liz and Christy and I. By the way, if you don't know Liz Wright and Christy Evers, the CSU chairpersons, elementary and secondary, and we really work together as a team. So sharing information to us, perhaps about thoughts, concerns, positive feedback on what we're doing, as well as an opportunity for us to share with the advisory committee some of what we're doing, and they will help us kind of disseminate that information out into the community to a greater extent than we're already able to do. So we had our first meeting, we set some norms for the group, and we're having another meeting next month where we're going to be setting some goals for our group work. And so you'll hear more about that committee or from the members of that committee. 2 of them in the room right now, right? 3. 3. Want to raise your hands? And 4. Thank you. Thank you. So thank you for your time. Remember these faces, and you want to actually say your name so people also could reach out to you. You want to start, Liza? They know you, right? Liza's on the committee.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Weitzman. Jackie McCarthy.
Phil Imperial.
Okay, and so we've got right here. We've got middle school, we've got high school, and we've got elementary school right here on the committee. So it's a wonderful kind of mix of parents. And so I think I'll leave it at that for now, because I know Stephanie has got a wonderful presentation for us. And with time limits, I want to make sure that she has the time. But as always, if anybody's got any questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to any one of us. And thank you for being here today.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead. Did you want to introduce Stephanie? Stephanie has been here before, but you want to go ahead and introduce her?
I'm good. So I'm Stephanie Bellantoni, for those of you who haven't met me or been to one of my presentations. I have to say how much I love coming here, because you guys get the greatest turnouts, and I'd love to see that much parent engagement. I wish I could say we get these kind of numbers in other districts. It really says something. So today we're going to do a presentation that I am actually in love with this presentation. I'm in love with this topic. I think that it's a critical topic for any of us as parents, period, let alone parents of kids with special learning differences. Recently I was having a conversation with someone in my family, and we were talking about just the state of the world and things that go on, and mental health, and do we take care of our mental health in this country or not. And I think it's really very related. I think that, you know, for us, we all are on a path of self-awareness and learning who we are and how do we manage our day. And I think that for our kids, it's important for them to see us doing that and growing in that way, so that they can start to learn that they need to do that too. And sometimes for our children with disabilities or learning differences, it's harder for them because they're 8 or 9 or 12 and they're grappling with the fitting in piece, which hopefully those of us in our 40s and 50s are kind of over that, although sometimes it's still a struggle. But when we're 10 or 11 years old, And we know what's going on in that little head just for a typical kid, and then you add all those differences on top of it. I think it's really, really important for us as parents and educators and any adult who's working with kids to really be conscious of supporting their efforts to become self-aware and to become accepting of who they are. Not that they have to love their differences, but that they have to just be okay with their differences and do what they have to do so that they can achieve. That having the difference is not the end of the story. That you just have to embrace it and make it part of who you are, and then you move on. So that's what we're here to talk about today. There were a couple of self-assessment tools up front that I had left there to do in the beginning. Not collecting them, there's no grade on it, but it's really just for you to take a look at it and see where you and your child are in that process of, are they self-aware? Do they know they have a special education program? Are they going to their IEP meetings? Are they engaged in their IEP meetings? And of course, that's a different conversation depending on the age and functioning level of your child, but it's a conversation nonetheless. It's a different conversation, but it should be a consideration no matter what student we're dealing with. So just briefly, I forget, do we have a clicker here or not? Just use the mouse. So the Westchester Institute for Human Development is where I work. It is an organization, it's a not-for-profit that supports individuals with disabilities across their lifespan. There are endless services there and different departments, everything from early intervention to adult services and housing. And the Community Support Network, which is where the Special Ed Parent Center is housed, provides support including early childhood direction, which is for children 0 to age 5, up until they go into kindergarten. The Special Education Parent Center, which is myself and my colleagues who support families with children ages 5 or kindergarten age up through age 21 or graduation. There's the Medicaid Service Coordination Department, which assists with adult services and applications for different kinds of adult services and benefits. And New York State Parent to Parent is sort of in a holding pattern right now. We don't have a person there right now, but typically that's a contract that we're administering out of WIHD as well, which is really support for families in everything but school. So you're looking for a particular specialist, a neurologist, a dentist, or you're just looking to connect with families who are dealing with the same issues as you. That's what the New York State Parent to Parent person does. What they're doing while they're looking for a fill-in at our location is that I believe Hudson Valley is being handled out of Capital Region. So if you go on the New York State Parent to Parent website, they'll give you an 800 number or the 518 number, and that they're handling that until they fill in.
Do you want me to do that for you?
No. So there's 14 parent centers across New York State. The entire purpose of Parent Center is because they want every district to look like this at their SEPTA meetings. They want parent engagement. They want lots of parents interested in the issues and involved in the conversations. What we do is we do everything from instruct parents as to what an IEP is and how the special education process works, to helping them grapple with difficulties with different situations in their schools or with their IEPs, and really help them strategize as to identifying goals and who the best resources in their district are to talk to, and how to really get to that outcome that you're looking for. We do direct service, which is a parent calls or comes in, and the time is really not limited, the number of times is not limited, and everything we do is free. Also, everything we do is in English and in Spanish, so one of our colleagues is bilingual, and she works with bilingual families in Spanish as well. And we do information sessions and workshops like this one on a host of different topics, in school districts, in community centers, disability-specific groups. We've been to houses of worship, helping with religious ed integration, anything that involves a child and their education and their integration into their community. So that's the Parent Center. Our list for today, what we're going to do today, we're going to talk about us as parents. We're going to talk about why we're having this presentation, why we're talking about effectively talking to our kids about their disability. We're going to talk about how to do it. And we're going to talk about resources that can help you support your child in developing that self-awareness and being a self-advocate and being clear about what they need in their education and otherwise. So what, we're going to skip this turn and talk because there's a lot I want to do today and I don't want to run into a time crunch. Actually, when I've done this presentation in the past, this becomes just sort of a group discussion anyway. And one of the things when we talk about us as parents is, and you all have different stories and different experiences. So some of you have children who you've been aware of their disability from the day they were born. Some of you have learned about learning differences as you got into maybe kindergarten, first grade. Some of you might have high school students that developed anxiety issues in high school, or there's all different points that we have to grapple with our children's differences when it becomes something that's going to impact their education and their life. And I want you to try and remember that day that you realized this was not a phase, this is not something that's going to go away, this is something I'm going to have to grapple with. And I want you to think about what you felt. I want you to think about, were you angry? Were you sad? Were you everything all together? And what did you do about it? What did you hope for besides just hoping it would go away, right? The reason that I have you do this is because for me, and maybe it's different for you, so I'm going to preface this by saying for me, my daughter has Down syndrome, right? I have absolutely no idea what it's like to have Down syndrome. And I can remember the day she was born, and she's our oldest, so my husband was a bag of nerves to be a father, period, right? And when she was born, he said to me, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't even know how to be a dad. But at least before, I was getting ready to be a dad and teach somebody how to do what I did, right? And now I feel like, and of course at this point we knew nothing about Down syndrome, right? And he's like, I don't even know what to teach her. I don't even know what her life's going to be. How can I possibly teach her, right? And I feel like I remember that conversation a lot. And I feel to a certain degree, all of us, whether you're dealing with a learning disability or a social disability or a physical disability, any kind of a difference that we have not experienced ourselves, right? There's that big question mark. I don't even know how to help my kid. I've never done that, never been there, right? And to remember back to those feelings that you went through, I feel like is a good refresher for you, because now you've been grappling with it. Maybe you've been working with professionals and doctors and people in the school to get a better understanding of dyslexia or whatever it is that your child is dealing with, and you're trying to learn it, but then what about him or her? And how am I going to help him or her understand that this is not something that we're going to put in a drawer and you're going to go on and have a regular, typical life just like Joe Normal, right? So this, for me, this is the only thing that I can try to think of when I think to myself, how does my daughter feel, right? So one of the things you picked up on your way in is a copy of Welcome to Holland, which some of you might be familiar with. It's a very well-known short piece written by Emily Kingsley, who is, well, she's very well-known in the Down syndrome community, and I guess fairly well-known in the disability community, and certainly in the TV and media population, because she was a writer for Sesame Street for a very long time. And she was the one who back in the 70s introduced children with disabilities onto the Sesame Street set, right? She's the parent of a child with Down syndrome, who's now probably close to 50 years old. And she wrote Welcome to Holland. And if you have it there with you, it gives you a flavor of a parent's perspective having a child who's different, right? So she had a son with Down syndrome. And really, when you read through it, and I kind of feel like it's on TV, I should read it, but I can take up the time to do it. When you read through Welcome to Holland, the whole gist of it is you planned a trip to Italy, right? And you packed up and you got all excited for what you were going to see there, and you got your father's books, and you were all set, your itinerary was set, what you were going to go see. You were going to go to the Leaning Tower, you were going to go to the Colosseum, and then the plane landed and you were in Holland. And that feeling of, you know, that somebody made a mistake. I need to get back on the plane and I need to go to Italy because I don't want to be in Holland. I'm not prepared to be in Holland, and it's not a problem. Just put me back on the plane. I'll go back to Italy. And it's this whole idea then by the end of the passage of Holland's pretty great. And it's not as famous as Italy, and it's not really somewhere that people strive to go, but it's really nice there. And there's a lot of really beautiful things there, and you really can enjoy yourself. And there's books for that too, right? So it's this whole concept of embracing the difference rather than rejecting it and saying, no, this is not what I want, which is, I don't know, for me, kind of your knee-jerk reaction of somebody must have made a mistake. What I didn't put out on the table purposefully was Amsterdam International, and on the right-hand side is the authors of these pieces. These are all available online. That's where I got them, and I did print them out for you. I just didn't want you to get bogged down reading them while we were doing our workshop. So Amsterdam International is a little bit different, okay? And that's a parent who's really angry and refusing to leave the airport, right? So she's in Amsterdam International Airport in Holland. She's like, I'm not leaving. Someone needs to get me back on a plane, right? And kind of, I mean, I haven't read it myself in a long time. The idea there is, no, I'm too angry. And then there's more of them. Somebody wrote, why I hate Welcome to Holland. And then somebody else wrote, I once hated Welcome to Holland, but now I like it, right? And I think it's that whole journey that we go on. Point being, there's a million different perspectives, right? And there's no right or wrong, right? It's sort of how you just get up in the morning and put your pants on and go live your life. So I do have all of those pieces, but essentially we're all reacting differently to that loss, right? Not that we lost a child, but we lost the child we thought we were going to have. We lost that typical little girl that was going to go to us at the mall and go to Taylor Swift concerts with me, and not that she wouldn't still love to do that, but it's I got a different little girl, one that I would not give up for anything in the world, right? But it's not what I expected, right? So we will never raise that typical child, right? We're going to raise this different one instead. So that's our experience as parents, right? And as we get further away from it, right? My daughter was born 12 years ago. I wouldn't say I'm over it, because I probably, when she's 40 years old, if I'm still here, God willing, I'll probably still have days when I just cry because it's not fair, right? But I'm okay with it, right? I've embraced it, I do what I can, and just like I do for my other 3 sons who don't have an identified disability, they're certainly all different, and I cry about them too sometimes, and I do what I can to support them. So, for our children who are different, and let me just stop for a second because I meant to say this in the beginning. When I do this presentation and I look around at faces, I always feel, I want to say to you, whatever I say during this presentation, this is a very personal topic. Okay, so nothing I say is right or wrong. What my intention is for this presentation is to really head you down the path of thinking about things you should think about. It's going to be different, so that you might see something up here that you're like, no, that's not the case for my kid, and that's okay. So in case I get to something, I just wanted to preface it with that. So our students' struggles are all that they know. They don't know what it is to be that typical kid because they're not, and they never have been, right? They've always sensed they were different, and learning about their differences is going to cause upset because it's not fair. It's not. And life is not fair, right? But it's kind of hard to tell an 8-year-old life is not fair, get over it. Right? When we're 50, it's okay to be like, you know what? Put your big girl pants on and go do your life. But when you're 10, you won't, as a parent, we feel like it's not fair, right? But one of the things, and I've read a bazillion articles on this topic, one of the things that I think is really, really, indisputable is that these kids who feel different, and I can't say us, these kids who feel different, when they find out what the differences are and they have an opportunity to learn about it, there sometimes is a sense of relief. Oh, that's what it is. There's not something wrong with me. I can stop waking up every morning hoping I'll be normal. Now I get it, right? So this guilt and this sense of shame that they did something wrong kind of goes away when you open a book and say, look, other people have this, and people are studying it, and educators are working to try and figure out the best way to help you achieve and succeed, no matter what it is, right? And you don't have to talk about, can you be a brain surgeon when you become an adult? I don't know. Let's not talk about that right now. Let's just talk about today, right? So as parents, we can teach them to become self-aware, learn self-management skills, and learn about what resources and supports are out there for them. Okay? The last time I was here, and I can't remember who it was, I think I just know you, so you looked familiar to me. There was somebody in the audience, and one of the things that came up in my last presentation, I have no idea how it came up, because it wasn't this topic, but I have a son who is grappling right now with alopecia, right? So, and he's in middle school, so he can't think of anything worse, right? I can't, it's my son, right? And he's lost like probably 60% of his hair, and it's miserable, right? And one of the things, after crying every morning after I force him to get on the school bus, is I have to let him know there's supports out there, right? So I have to introduce him to the social worker in his school, right? And now he knows he can go there if he's feeling insecure, right? I have to tell him what to ask for, right? So in our middle school, they give out passes for lunchtime for help with the science teacher, or going to the library, or going to the media, but you have to get a pass and they're limited, right? He didn't want to go outside because the wind might blow his hair, right? And the librarian, he came home one day and he was grinning from ear to ear with his little cap on, right? And she gave him a laminated library pass. It's golden label. He will never not have a library pass, right? And it's nice to know, A, the supports are there, and he's starting to identify who they are and what they are, right? So I give that as an example. He does not have a disability. He's a straight A student, and I'd like it to stay that way. I don't want him to retreat into a hole and become, I want him to have help. So my husband and I are looking into getting him some time with a psychologist or whatever supports are out there. But I tell you that story about a kid without a cognitive disability or learning difference because everyone's got stuff, For us in this room, right now it's education and achieving the most you can. But everyone's got stuff, and I feel like as parents, I don't know, I've been working at the Parent Center for a couple of years now, and I feel like it's more about parenting than it is about special education. I should say that, but I do. I feel like being an effective member at that IEP meeting, I don't have to know the regulations inside and out. I need to know my kid, and I need to be comfortable with my parenting and what are our goals, and am I involving my kid? I don't know if that's about special ed or if that's about parenting, or if you really can't separate the two. Right? But that's what I want to talk about today, is what can we do for our kids? Because we can't eliminate the struggle. I mean, I wish we could, but we can't. So again, we're just going to talk together. I didn't even give you an opportunity to share on that one, but we'll share on this one, because I want to get to the good stuff, right? When you think about talking to your kids about their disability, about what it is, what it means for them, what it might mean for them going forward, and what they need to do to grapple with it, can you guys just let me know if you're comfortable to raise your hand if your child is aware that he has a disability? Okay. And those of you who raised your hand, do you think they have a full understanding? Do they have a textbook? I know my daughter used to tell me that, I know what Down syndrome is. It means you use a nebulizer when you get a cold. And, for her, when she was 5 years old, that's what it meant. And it was because we had this book about a little girl with Down syndrome, and there was a picture of her using the nebulizer, which is the breathing machine when you have, respiratory. So, and as she's grown, her understanding becomes greater. She knows that the work she does in school is not what her peers are doing. She knows that. And she's not embarrassed about it anymore. In fact, don't try to give her 6th grade math. She's going to give it right back to you and be like, no, this is a mistake. I need my work, right? So it's the reason I ask that is because depending on the disability, depending on the kid, there can be varying degrees of what do I really understand about what I have. So those of you who have not really broached the conversation, and let me preface this by saying, this is not one conversation. This is not like you're going to sit down and 10 minutes later you're going to go, that's over. That's not really, and if you think about it, no conversation is really like that, right? But the conversation really goes on constantly, and I would suggest starting it as soon as possible. So whether your child is 5 or 15, and it may not even be a formal conversation. It just may be stopping avoiding it. Don't skirt around and make other conversations, right? So, but we're scared, right? What is a fear that you have about your child learning that he's different? Learning that he has a disability, learning that he's never going to read a book the way other people do, learning that he may never achieve to the levels of, Mary Jane, who's in the top of the class. Learning that numbers may never make sense to him. the way that they do for other children. That he may not run or jump or move the way that others do. What are we scared of?
My son's 15 and a half, he has Down syndrome, and we've had these conversations as we go, and I just had it with him about a week ago. And partly because we're in an inclusive environment, and for him it's worked really well, is that he knows he's different, but he's very okay with it. Like, he doesn't think there's anything wrong with being different. And so when I've asked him, like, do you understand that you're different than other kids? He's like, yes, and at different work, yes. When I try to push him more, all of a sudden he's like, are you trying to tell me something's wrong with me? And so my fear is, like, how much do they really need to know? You know, and so far, everything he's wanted, we've been able to figure out how to get it for him, and he feels like he's got a lot of people friends, he's in all academic classes, he does theater, he's just joined the wrestling team. Like, how much do I have to sit there going, no, when you're this age, this is going to be, or this is what you really have to worry about in the future, when right now, he's happy as a clam, and if I try to push him a little bit more, he's like, I'm supposed to be worried about something?
Right. So I think that when you're dealing with an intellectual disability, it might be different for someone who's dealing with dyslexia or dysgraphia or a disability that's not as visible, right? And I think that your son's answer is awesome, frankly, because there's not anything wrong with him. So, I don't know, my answer to that question would be like, no, there's not anything wrong with you. And unless he's experiencing disappointment at something he can't do or he doesn't have access to. And if he's not talking about, I don't know what he talks about in terms of his future goals, but that's where I would bring the reality in of, and, you know, not a nasty negative reality of you can't do that, but really exploring for him the same way we do when we talk about self-determined IEPs and driving that IEP is just, well, if you want to do X, Y, and Z with your life, let's look at that, because there's steps to get anywhere, right? Yeah. And then talking about, are those steps doable? You know, do you think you can do that? You know, or talking about, you know, high school diplomas and what does it mean? And what are we going to do after high school? Are we going to go to work, or are we going to go to school? Or are we going to go learn how to do, you know, a trade of some kind? I would say if he's happy with who he is and he understands what having that, I think having a disability, what it means is what it means for you, right? So, you know, for my son, if he was the kind of kid who was just like, I don't care what anybody else thinks, he'd probably just shave his head and go to school, and then he doesn't have anything. Who cares, right? But he's not that kid. He's very self-conscious. He's 11. He's in 6th grade, which is just horrible no matter who you are, right? And he's really self-conscious about it, right? It's really affecting him. So it does mean something to him. But I don't know that that's any different when we're talking about a disability like Down syndrome, a disability like autism, a learning disability, because they're all, some are visible, some are not. Some affect our functioning in school, some do not. But what does the kid care about? Is it affecting the kid, right? So I think that, I love that your son said, you're trying to tell me something's wrong with me? And I would have just been like, no, not at all. I just want to make sure that you don't have any questions, right? So if he wants to, you know, be on the football team, and he goes and tries out and doesn't make it, or, I remember when I was in high school, and this was a long time ago, where these were not even conversations you had. There was a boy in our school, and I don't know if he had anything really, but he was on the football team, but he never made the football team. But they let him on the team, and he carried the water bottles, and he did the scorekeeping, and he was, I mean, I don't know if he wanted to play football or if he couldn't play football, but that may have been a conversation that had to be had, that there's certain things you need to be able to do to be on the football team, and maybe not for him, but maybe for I'm making up this dream of your son's that he wants to be on the NFL. You know, you would just be like, it wouldn't be safe, because you don't have the reflexes that those guys have, and it is because of your Down syndrome. If it was, you know, I'm just saying. But I think unless it's impacting their journey, you know, do you want to talk about things about you that are not impacting you? You'd be like, leave me alone, I'm fine, right?
But I guess as far as in the when you're saying being an advocate and his CSE meeting, right? So I'm there saying, well, he actually has these things and stuff. How much do we have to push him to take that? Like, what are you saying now that he's in high school that we're supposed to be pushing this onto him and making him more aware so he can say it as opposed to me saying it for him?
So we're going to talk about that, and I have some tools that we're going to look at together. But let me get back to this question, but we're definitely going to talk about that. And the answer is both of you are still going to be involved. And you're going to support him, and your school district's going to support him in working through those questions. But I want to hear from some of the parents, if they're willing, about those fears. What are we afraid to talk about?
I think we're afraid we're wrong, and we're afraid we'll limit them, or that we'll predict their outcome and change what would have been.
Okay, excellent. Anybody else want to share what we're afraid of?
I did talk to my son, and I feel like sometimes I wonder if it was a good idea because he's so embodied this disability as a can't, or that it limits his own abilities. He's become. I mean, I was reading this self-determination. There's a lot of good things I can see that he's capable of, but some things which are out of our control, having friends.
Right.
He has no friends at 17. I've talked to so many parents of children with autism who say, my child has no friends. And I'm constantly having this conversation with people. And I'm worried that, like the woman I spoke to whose son is 24 and is socially isolated and is worried about what's going to happen. What is going to happen to these kids, 1 in 69, who have no friends, no social relationships, no interpersonal relationships? What is going to happen to them? How are they going to function? And where do we step in terms of responsibility? As a parent, bringing your child to social skills classes or this or that, but it, you know, and the limits of what they do. This is my great worry. What is when I'm dead? What will happen to him? I am his social.
And I think, and I can't answer that question. Way beyond the letters after my name, right? But there's an autism unit at WIHD, and I know they exist all over the place that may be working on answering those questions. But what I would say, there was something that you said about the not having any friends, and I think that those of you who don't have kids with autism, just plug in there any other thing that makes you upset about your child's situation right now. I don't know, because I don't know your son, whether not having any friends upsets him.
Oh, he sobs for hours.
It does, okay. So for some kids, it doesn't. I've heard parents say to me, he's got no friends and he doesn't even care. He's fine by himself. And I don't think that either is okay, but I think that for purposes of self-awareness, I would probably suggest working with the people at your school, the social workers, the psychologists, of how do we, because I mean, that's what autism is, right? It's a social disability, right? So that ability to connect with other people. And, you know, for fear of going beyond my expertise, I won't go further with that, but to what degree can we make them understand it, right? I think there are people with autism who have that understanding. There's a little boy in my school district, and he introduced himself to me one day. I was helping with the talent show, right? And he wasn't really talking to anyone. He was talking to himself, but he was being louder than he could be right next to the stage, and the show was going on. And I must have reprimanded him a couple of times, and I didn't know. And finally he came up to me, right, A+ for mom, and he said, I'm a very active child, and I really can't stop talking. And I looked at him, and I smiled, and he smiled at me, and I said, okay. I said, you know what? Could you just go down the hallway a little further away from the door to the stage so the audience doesn't hear you? And he was like, all right. And you know what he said to me? I don't have anyone to talk to down there. I don't even think he realized he wasn't talking to anyone. He was just talking, you know? And I share that story only because it really, that's not your son, I realize that, but he got his stuff. He knew why he was annoying me, and he very, very eloquently explained it to me. And it resolved the tension there, because I was kind of like, get this kid out, this is dangerous. But he explained it to me, and we solved it, right? And I don't know, for kids who are on the autism spectrum who struggle more with the emotional interaction and the sharing of feelings, I don't know what the answer to that is. But if I were his mom, I probably would go fill up my head with all the information and talk to all the psychologists and say,
Oh,
what
I
is
have.
there, right, what can we do? And
If
I
I
wanna
may
give
say,
you an
I think we need, personally, I think other kids, I've become to realize that we need to do a better job of giving kids who'd be willing to be friendly tools so that they would, because I think a lot of them would be willing to step forward and be friendly, but a lot of them don't know, or they're intimidated, or they see behaviors like, and they're averse to going and trying to invite the kids. And that's my opinion.
So that's another workshop that I haven't made yet, but I'll get to it, which is working with our typical kids, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which is something that, frankly, I'm not an educator, but I think that educators do it where they can, try to facilitate appropriate interaction, but if you look at everything else that they're responsible to do in those 5 hours, it's hard. I mean, I think that it's doable, but there's a lot they have to do from an educator standpoint, and then to bring into that, supporting appropriate social interactions with all
But you
these
know what
different
often
kids.
happens is that the special ed kids are put together. So you have these dysfunctional kids put together, I don't want to say an appropriate term, but you have kids with issues put together as this is like their, and it ends up often not being helpful because it ends up turning kids off from intolerance of each other's disability. Instead of trying to group them with somebody who could be, say, a coach, like a peer coach, in terms of how to be friends or how to be someone with higher skills who could bring them up. Oftentimes they're put together with kids in the same level and they're not learning. They're just kind of like
So there are
tolerating each other's
programs
issues.
like that exist in, I know there's a couple of districts that have like official Best Buddies programs, but not even Best Buddies. There are places that put together these mentor programs, and it's not necessarily school directed, and they identify, who those kids are. Who are those kids that would benefit from that and could be supported in being that friend, right? To help integrate the child into community activities and things of that nature. But we can talk about that afterward, okay? Yeah.
I don't want to slow you down, but I wanted to mention I read about a program that was instituted in a university. So they took the top autism spectrum kids who were testing over 4.0 and paired them with highly social kids who were testing about 3.8 and above. Now, the highly social kids were willing to participate because they were impressed by the high scores of the engineering kids who were on the spectrum. They paired them up at mealtime, lunchtime, and dinner time, and their job was just to meet up and sit together. And the social kid would just nudge the non-social kid when it was like time to conversate or cue. Ask him what class he took today. What class did you take today? And they found that pairing them up, the kids enjoyed it. The social kids thought it was kind of funny, and they said that they were just so impressed by their academic ability in the classroom that they didn't mind at all having lunch with them or dinner with them. And the non-social kids loved it as well because they liked having someone to remind them to ask those stupid, mundane questions that they would never think of.
And
all
they
wanted
want
to
to
do is
be
keep
part of
reading their book.
Yeah. You know what they do actually, and this is something you can talk about with the people in your school building. I don't know where your son goes to school or what the situation is, but one of the things that they did with my daughter during lunchtime, she gets social skills on her IEP, so she's not antisocial, she's whatever the opposite of that is. So she's physically and verbally inappropriate sometimes with, no filter to the nth degree. And so what they did is they created this lunch bunch, and she gets to choose kids from her classes. Some have IEPs, some don't, and the social worker kind of works with them, listens to the conversations, kind of jumps in when necessary to say, is that an appropriate question to ask somebody? Is that appropriate when you're 11 years old, or whatever it is, to sort of facilitate a more appropriate interaction, which helps, because I think even with my daughter, who has a very different profile than your son, kids do tend to shy away. She's a little scary sometimes because she wants to hug everyone and she wants to be in your face and talk about things, and she's almost the opposite. She needs to get pulled back a little bit. But I think that it gets done in a way that she's starting to see. And as her mom, I'll tell her flat out, people are going to run the other direction. You can't do that. Teachers are not going to say that. They're going to do it in a more appropriate instructional way. But that's the overall message, is that you want to see them more appropriately interact, so that when they go into the lunchroom, people aren't afraid to come and sit down, right? So let me go through, and you guys touched on some of these some of the key responses to what are we afraid of in talking about our learning differences and our disabilities. I don't want her to feel different. She thinks she's like everyone else, and I don't want to crush her self-esteem. I met a dad who had a 6th grader with a learning disability, and he was at his wit's end because he says she's going into middle school, the work is getting more difficult. She's going to know. She's going to know that she needs more than just my help with her homework, right? And I credit that dad because he's the reason why I started working on this presentation, because I started to realize what a prevalent issue it was. And my response to something like this would be, who do you want to crush your self-esteem? Because someone's gonna out them at some point, right? It's not something that we can hide, right? And as adults, we know that. Everyone in this room at some point or another has tried to hide something about themselves, whether it's something physical or something emotional or something, about the way that you interact. And it's never really effective, okay? Either because it's just not effective and people find out, or you're so uncomfortable trying to hide the thing that, you make yourself sick, all right? And I would suggest, and again, it's different for every child and every difference, whatever it is you're talking about, but teach them to be proud of it, to at least embrace it and make it work for them, right? Not to worry about what we're not, but to focus on what we are. And I think that's what we all, even as adults, we still struggle with that. Don't worry about what we don't have, right? Right? And people always tell us, well, you've got your health, right? And even as adults, we're like, yeah, but I wanted that ideal job, right? Or I wanted it to work out, that relationship with that person, or whatever it is. Learning to just embrace who we are and what we have, right? So what am I doing with my son, right? Buying him Under Armour caps. Look how cool this one is, right? Trying to get, it's okay. We tried to suggest that he shave his head, right? I'm using him as an example, but when he's older, he'll appreciate it, right? And because in my heart of hearts, I want to sit down with him and say, Michael, it's going to come back, don't worry. But I don't know that. I don't know. I'm afraid to take him on the website where they show all the kids with alopecia with these glowing smiles and bald heads. They're beautiful, but he might not think so, right? I don't know where to go with it, but instead, I know he loves Under Armour, right? So I'm like, look at all these Under Armour caps. You can get one in every color of the rainbow, right? And he just started this week with the caps. He didn't want to wear the cap, right? But now, he never wants to take it off. Whatever works for him, right? The principal was like, just get a letter from the dermatologist, it's fine, right? What am I doing? The kids are asking me why am I wearing a cap. Tell them you're doing research for Under Armour. Tell them you have a special job for Under Armour and you're researching all the caps. I don't care what you tell them. Or just tell them you have alopecia. Whatever works for you, whatever makes you be able to just say, I'm just going to go through my day, right? Okay. So that's one of the most common questions. I'm afraid he'll use the diagnosis as an excuse for not trying. Who said that? Somebody said that, was it you?
Oh yeah, that's definitely
I'm
true.
afraid he'll use it as the diagnosis as an excuse for not trying, right? And my response to that is that maybe knowing about learning differences and knowing about the things that separate us out will be the reason that they try even harder. That once they know what it is, they can at least focus on that and try to overcome it and try to grapple with whatever it is that's making them different, right? So that they can be more like, so that they can, not that they can be more like, that they can engage, they can be part of what's going on, even if it's in a different way, right? My daughter took tennis lessons. I don't think she ever hit a ball over the net. She played with the tennis balls, right? She likes to throw the tennis balls to the instructor and the tennis teacher would volley them back. And the teacher was upset at the end of the 6 weeks and she said, I'm really sorry, I didn't really teach your daughter how to play tennis. I said, well, but now she knows what a tennis ball is and she's familiar with it. And maybe next year you'll throw the balls at her and she'll hit them back. I mean, it's just different for her, right? But she was able to go to tennis with her brothers and she took a tennis lesson and she knows what that is. Maybe next year we'll teach her about the lines, right? Of course, she completely lost interest in tennis, but... Another common response, I don't want him to think he can't pursue his dreams, right? She wants to be a doctor, and I cannot sit there and tell her she can't be a doctor. And the response I have to that is, He probably can't, unless he learns how to pave his way with necessary supports, right? This gentleman in this picture, I have no idea who he is, but there's no way he would be sitting there doing that job that he's doing if someone didn't at some point say to him, this doesn't mean you can't work with your hands and you can't create, which is what you want to do, right? And my daughter, really, I don't think she really wants to be a doctor, because I don't think she wants to do all that work, even if she could do it. But she wants to help people. She goes to so many doctor's appointments, and she loves that setting, right? I don't see why she can't work in that setting. She could be a doctor probably, but she could do something, right? But to not tell her, right? I mean, for me, I didn't really have much of a choice, because when you're in 6th grade and you're still learning to add without using your fingers, there was no getting around why she's not doing that, right? And now she knows math is really hard for her. She's an unbelievable reader. Unbelievable. She spends the majority of her downtime reading, right? She can't answer the questions on a comprehension test to save her, but she's reading. She can read. She can do a job that involves reading, right? And as long as she doesn't have to put anything back on paper, we're still working on that piece of it. But embracing what she is and not worrying about what she's not, right? Okay, so those are some of the most common fears that people have. And this week we've talked about this a little bit up until now. Why? Why are we talking about this? Why did I create a presentation on this? Why is it important? So that our kids can understand themselves in a positive way and not draw the wrong conclusions. One of the things I read, and it might be in one of those articles I gave you, is that if we don't talk to our kids about why they're different, they're going to come up with their own theories about why they're different. They did something wrong, I'm being punished, it must be because I was mean to my baby brother. And the truth is a lot less painful, especially because the truth, depending on the condition you're dealing with, and they all have different levels of rarity, but there are other people in the world that are grappling with this, and there are people studying it, and there are articles, and there are methods, right? We're learning more. We know a lot more now than we did 50 years ago, right? About how to teach kids who have different learning differences and need different approaches. It didn't used to be that way, and hopefully that research will continue. So they can understand what they need and ask for what they need. Right? So one of the things on my daughter's CSC that we've worked on is figuring out she can do most anything if you give her a visual checklist of what she's going to do. Right? You want to do long division? Give her a visual checklist. All those mnemonics that we memorized as kids, she's not going to memorize them. Give her a visual checklist. Right? And she can go through the different steps and do them. Right? Go do a research paper. Yeah, most 12-year-olds, well, not 12, most 15-year-olds, you could give them that instruction. When she gets to that point, she will need a visual checklist. Read 3 books on this topic. Take some notes. It has to be a check. And we've learned that about her. So whatever it is for your kid. Did you have a question?
I do. How do you support a child who refuses to acknowledge that he has a difference? Outwardly, no visible kind of sign.
So you've approached the conversation.
Yeah, many, many times, and if he does not want to engage with, he does not want to acknowledge he's different.
He doesn't want to have the conversation, or he's just like, you're crazy, I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, he's, both. He doesn't want to have the conversation. Are you telling me I have a learning disorder? No, but he just. How do I support my child in understanding there is no shame in being different? Everybody has their stuff, but he's got a positive contribution to make.
Right. Well, I don't know what his situation is. What does he struggle with?
He has poor executive function, attentional difficulties, and dysgraphia.
And how does that manifest for him? So is his work modified significantly, or?
We're just going through, we've just had a 504 review, so they're going to modify his homework.
Okay.
And then review again in 6 weeks.
Okay, but he's doing grade level work.
He's trying.
Yeah. So I guess what I was going to ask you is, and this comes up a lot with families that I work with, is it impacting his grades?
Yeah.
Does he see that?
Yeah.
So I think, and again, I feel like I don't want to step into realms that I'm not qualified for. Actually, I am working to build this presentation, so tune in for next year, with a colleague of mine who's a BCBA, who knows more about behavior and psychology, and then we're going to add a clinical piece to it. But for now, I think that I don't know your son. I don't really know what's driving those reactions. And I think probably what I would do is handle it with information and instruction to the extent that's appropriate for him and to the extent that's not going to be inflammatory, right? Because if a person is dealing with something in a refusal fashion, or rejecting or saying, talk to the hand, I don't know that I would push that at this point. I don't know what a professional would say, a psychologist would say, right? But I think that it's something to discuss with your CSE. I think it's something to discuss. Does he work with a school psychologist at all?
We're meeting there tomorrow for the first time.
Okay, so I would probably ask for suggestions, because as parents, we have our gut, right? And that's huge. That's actually most of it, right? But then we hit points where we're like, I don't really know what to do with this, right? That's where I was with my son, with having to drive him to school because he wouldn't get on the bus, hysterical tears every day. And I finally called a psychologist, and I went and talked to her, and we're going to see what happens. Because I don't think it's a big deal, but I don't want it to turn into a big deal, right? And I kind of am having the same feeling about your son's reaction to talking about his disability. I wouldn't want to push that either, right? You don't want to become the target for him of, I don't like her, she thinks there's something wrong with me, right? I would probably get help on that because I don't know. But I also think that there are subtle ways that you can introduce a child to the supports that they need without necessarily talking about what's wrong, right? So whether a person has something or not, he may need checklists for his daily routines. That's okay. We don't have to say there's something wrong. I mean, sort of what the word disability means is a whole nother presentation, right? It's not something wrong, right? That's a word we came up with that means people that can't, keep with the pack in the typical way, right? And disability has such a negative connotation to it. So you said it, and there's another mom over here who said it. I would respond to both of them by saying there's not anything wrong with you. You just are who you are, right? And you need certain tools to help you accomplish certain things.
No, don't.
No, I
No, don't.
Well, I don't know what to say to that. What happens when you don't have the tools, though? Then you don't get the task done, right?
Yeah.
So that's sort of, I don't know. Stumped me on that. That's sort of a grappling with who I am today. That is, I think for a lot of kids, it's a different amount of time, but they process through it. And at some point, his struggle will be at a point where he'll have to say, I do need these things, right? Because I can't get it done, right? And that's hard for us as parents, right? I don't want that to be the case. I don't want it to be the case that my daughter can't sit down and get her work done. I actually had that conversation with the CSE. I said, you're exposing her to all this stuff and you're sending home with work that she cannot do if I'm not sitting next to her and she doesn't want me sitting there. I said, you've got to go back to the foundational skills and give her homework to do that she can do. And they heard me, right? So everything's on the iPad, right? Which gives me another migraine headache. But she finally came home the other day with main idea homework that was on a paper, and she had a pencil, and she was reading a paragraph and writing the main idea and some details on her own. Was it 100% right? No, but she understood enough to know what to do, and she did it. And for her, she did her homework, right? And for me, that's my 12-year-old daughter. I don't care what her functioning level is. She needs to be her own person and do what she needs to do, right? And her teacher can get from that homework where she is on identifying main idea and supporting details, right? Just as probably better than if I sit down with her on her iPad and flip out a 3-paragraph response with her, right? I mean, she is who she is. So she can be motivated to overcome and not just feel confused about being different. And probably should have that in red font on the bottom so she can imagine success. A lot of kids who are different have no idea, never mind what success looks like, what they think it looks like. What does it look like to them? Right? I remember when I was in high school, they made me do a paper on where do you see yourself in 10 years, right? And I forget what it was. I think I wrote a paper, and I was a lawyer, and my husband was an architect, and we had twins and a dog, and this whole thing, right? And I didn't have a kid with Down syndrome, by the way, or alopecia. That wasn't in my story, right? But I think if you asked our kids to do that, I don't think my daughter could do that. I think my sons could probably do it. Because they know what they're good at. They know what they don't like. My daughter's kind of still working on that. And she knows that she's not that good at much, right? She thinks she likes to sing, right? So just like I thought I was going to be a solid gold dancer, right? She thinks she's going to be, the next Taylor Swift. Well, maybe she will, right? No, JoJo Siwa, right? That's the new one. JoJo Siwa, the bows in her hair. But I really think that my job as her mom is to emphasize those things that she's good at. I never saw someone follow a routine like this kid, right? So when we have parties and people come over and I'm making finger sandwiches or whatever it is, I show her how to do one, done. She does the other 25. And she can do that. And that's going to help her, right? Some kids can't do that, right? They can do the long division independently, but they can't follow the routine and make finger sandwiches, right? Just got to get her hands out of her mouth, right? So she doesn't get fired, right? Okay. Let's move on. This is just my fun slide, right? The truth will set her free. And these are all people that are different. That's my daughter in the middle, right? So you can meet Jessica. And I added Superman, Man of Steel, not only because I love him and that movie, but I realized one of the last times I was watching that movie, I mean, he's Superman, right? What does he have to complain about? But how different was he, right? I mean, he hit it every day. He didn't want anyone to know he was Superman, right? Because it was so different. Who wants to be different? Nobody wants to be different, even when you're Superman, right? And of course, Rudolph. We'll be seeing more of him in the next coming months, right? Okay. So becoming self-aware, if I were to define it, I don't think I could put it in a nutshell, but it's essentially a combination of understanding how we feel, understanding why we struggle with what we struggle with, understanding what's different about the way we learn, and most importantly, and I think this speaks to the social piece of it, how does my behavior impact others? Right? Why don't people talk to me? Why don't they sit near me? Why don't people like me? Which 9 times out of 10 is not true, but that's what it feels like when no one's talking to you and no one's sitting with you and no one's approaching you. They don't not like you, they don't know how to interact with you, right? Right? And I don't know about any of your kids' situations, but from what I watch in my home, I think to myself, if I was an 11-year-old girl, would I go sit with my daughter? I mean, she's better now, but coming up the ranks, she did a lot of yelling, she did a lot of crying, a lot of inappropriate behavior. She got talked to a lot by adults. I don't want to go near that, right? If I'm a regular 10-year-old kid, I might feel sorry for her. I might be curious about her. But there's a million other girls I can go make friends with. Why would I even go near that, right? And as my daughter gets older, hard as it is, I have to teach her that, right? I have to teach her that if you are aggressive and angry and use that tone of voice, people are not going to want to come talk to you. And she's not using that tone of voice because she's a nasty, mean person. She's frustrated. She's frustrated because nobody's talking to her and she doesn't really feel included, right? And it's sort of getting your head around, well, when you act that way, it makes other people act a certain way, right? If you could we do deep breathing a lot in my house. If you can just do your deep breathing, go to ask for help when you need it, the friends will come. Maybe not the way they do for the captain of the cheerleading squad, or whoever, although she thinks she's going to be the captain of the cheerleading squad. But it's easier for people to approach you, right? So it's kind of a double-edged sword. We have to work with our kids, and I think as a community we have to work with our typical kids. It's a big job, right? But it is really important, even for typical kids, to understand the way they act impacts the way other people see them, and the way other people engage with them. All right? Okay. How am I doing on time? Does that mean I have 10 minutes or 40? Okay. So let's take the next 5 or 10 minutes. There are 2 articles in your packet that you picked up. One looks like this. It's called Setting Students Up for Success Through Self-Awareness and Self-Advocacy. Okay, and I'm going to ask this half of the room to be Group A. You can look at that one. I mean, you can all read them both, but I'll ask them to chime in on this one. And the other one looks like this. It's called Explaining Learning Differences to Your Child. That's B. I'm going to ask this side of the room to focus on that one, okay? So you can read them. The 2 articles I gave you to read, I really felt like were right on point for this topic. The first article is written by Melanie Reeder. I put the link onto the PowerPoint if you want to get a copy of it or more copies of it. And those of you, who is A, this side of the room? So the questions I would have for those of you who focused on this article is, why is it important for all students to build their independence? Because independence, I don't know that you can have a conversation about independence without talking about self-awareness, right? Because being independent means being on your own, right? Doing what you need to do. And in order to do what you need to do, you need to know what you need, right? So did any of you have any thoughts about why independence is so important from reading that article? You guys can chime in too. I just separated you out as A and B. Yeah?
It made me think that it might help them to not take help where they don't need it.
Okay.
Just focus on accepting help where they do need it. So
Okay.
that they don't weaken themselves in other areas where they have strengths.
So we don't want to fall down the path of learned helplessness, right? My daughter's case in point, she's 12 years old with a one-to-one assistant still. I mean, I don't think she needs one, but she's always had one. She's taken advantage of it. She asks me every year when the letter comes from the school, who's my helper this year? You know, like it's her golf caddy. And it's really, you know, honestly, there's a lot of things I think my daughter could be doing, and she's not doing it because she's just completely, so we're sort of working on that. I don't know if anybody here has a one-to-one, but one of the things that I've asked my district to work on is really having that person not only focus on supporting her, but focus on backing off, right?
Yes.
So if she has to go get a drink of water, let her go get a drink of water. Okay, if she doesn't come back in 5 minutes, you can go get it. She's not going to go anywhere. The building is completely shut down. There's only one point of access, and there's a person sitting right there. She's not going anywhere. Let her go get a drink of water. Let her go to the bathroom. Let her go to the nurse. Whatever she has to do. Whatever you would normally do for other 6th graders, let her do it. And if she gets lost, she'll walk into a teacher and she'll say, I need to get back to Miss 2, Mrs. Rowe, right? And she'll go. Yeah.
I was going to agree with you, Lee, but it's funny, I have the exact same issue you do.
It's hard though, because
yeah.
I don't think she could manage the whole day because she does need
Right.
support.
Yeah.
I don't know that she needs it all day. I don't know that she needs someone standing there.
But I think, you know, like with my son, he's twice now at his meeting, I don't want this. We're making, you know, steps forward, and there's going to be a back. Like,
He doesn't want the aid.
No, he said, I do not want the aid anymore at his meeting.
So
Twice.
are they working on an independence plan to sort of wean them off?
Yes, and it's interesting.
You can't
'cause
do a cold turkey.
No,
really.
and
Yeah.
there's an incident came up, and the TA got all worried, and I'm like, you know what, it's good, but I think it's important with the independence that all the people are in on this. That
Well,
they,
that's true of anything having to do with your IEP, right?
right.
And as parents, we're probably most in tune, well, not most in tune, but we know quicker who on that team is in tune and who's not, right?
And I think
So,
you know, just to finish before I forget, that you know, like, I think also, so often I find when I'm looking back on the whole special ed experience, so often the kids' deficits are constantly pointed out. You need to work on this, you need to work on that, you can't sit down, blah, 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 blah. That sometimes we don't realize how that really impacts them, and that their successes need to be pointed out. I mean, I realized that when I said to my son, do you realize I have no idea how to use your diabetic pump anymore because you've mastered it yourself. And somebody asked me, are you overseeing it? And I said, well, that's great, except I wouldn't be able to do anything because he has mastered it. I've forgotten how to do it. I have to go back and get the manual. And I said to him, you realize I can't do that anymore because you've taken this over yourself.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
And I think in other areas of school, they constantly, because I think it's so easy to fall into where you're missing, you're not getting your homework on time, what's the problem, blah, blah, blah. You know, that when they are doing these things that are so successful and they don't even realize it themselves, that reinforcing
Sure.
that.
Sure. I think everyone could benefit from probably being a little bit more positive. I think the difficulty is that, you know, it's school, right? It's about achievement. So the places where you're not achieving is where we look to build you up, right? And the places where you're succeeding, especially for our kids with disabilities, a success might be something that everyone else does all the time, but we still need to celebrate it and praise it. So I hear what you're saying on that.
Because that leads to independence. I'm capable
Yeah.
of doing this. What's the next thing I'm going to be capable of doing?
Right, right. To quote my daughter, I got this. That's her big, I got this. And you know what? If she says I got this with her homework, I don't care what she's writing on that paper. I let her do it. Because you know what? She's got this. And if she goes in and the teacher's going to say, that's not really what the directions asked you to do, then she'll learn something, right? Rather than me just browbeating her saying, do this, put this here. What's the purpose of that? I'm not going to live forever, right? So not only does she recognize, oh, I'm not that good at that. I really didn't read that instruction carefully, right? So you're right. I think the independence piece is huge. And I think the independence piece allows them to know, I can't really do this school thing without support, right? If mom doesn't help me, I really can't do it. And if mom's not coming on me with, you got 20 minutes left, you better get that done, I don't get it done. And I think what we do as parents, and I don't want to say I'm a helicopter parent because I know there's parents worse than me, but I am kind of like, oh, geez, Nicholas forgot his lunch and I'll go bring him. And you want to make everything right, and you want them to be comfortable that their homework is right, but I'm not sure we're helping them. Right? I already graduated from the 6th grade and did quite well. I don't think that my daughter's teachers care whether or not I can do the work. Certainly not her modified work. I'm not getting any applause for it. And it's not, and I think as parents, we just want to make that right. We want, and I spoke to a parent one time, and she was complaining that her school district was not giving her any support. They don't support them at all. This is, and I asked her about the homework, and long story short, she's doing the homework. And I'm like, why would they support you? I said, do they know? I said, because I do that sometimes, but I'll send a note that says, I did this hand over hand with my daughter. She could not do it. And I said, do they know the level of support you're, because she said he'll get upset if he doesn't have it done. I'm like, okay. So he's still learning, even if you're walking him through it, but do the teachers know you're walking them through it? Because if they don't know, and they think he's doing this all independently, why would they give him supports? He's a straight-A student. And the person I was talking to was like, oh, you're right. You're right. I probably should tell them. I said, you have to either let him fall on his face and do the homework the best he can, and then they'll be like, wow, this kid needs help. Or do what you're doing, but for goodness sake, let them know that you're supporting him through that because he can't do it independently. Right? And that's our piece. That's our inability to accept, right? And I do it with my boys too. I have one little boy who I swear he's a genius, but he's disorganized like I've never seen. He's a mess. But I do not touch his backpack. I will not go through his stuff because I want his report card to reflect, you're doing okay. You probably could do a lot better if you get on top of your organization and hand stuff in when it needs to get. And if he gets upset about it, well then so be it. They grab the reins and do what you got to do. Now that's not a kid with a disability, and I think that I have less empathy there. I'm like, toughen up, right? And I've had to learn to do that with my daughter, right? Because it's not fair. But it's not really fair that he's so disorganized either. I mean, we all have our stuff. I'm not aligning Down syndrome with being disorganized. I'm just saying that we all have our stuff that holds us back. And we've got to figure out what it is and manage through. Some of us need 85 reminders in our calendar through the day. Some people don't need that, right? Everybody's different. So I think the big takeaway I had from this was students must know and understand themselves before they can tell others what they want or need. And when we get to the tools, which I really want to get to, that's really the key. Is that you can't engage in your IEP meeting and talk about what you need to achieve this or that goal if you don't know A, what that goal is, B, what you're capable of, or C, what you're not capable of, to know where you need support, right? And our B article was explaining learning disabilities to your child, okay? And those of you, well, the whole room really, it's a small enough group. But you guys who focused on Article B, did you have any key takeaway, something you disagreed with or something that really stood out to you from that article? I had put on here, how do you feel about the author's opinions about making reference to celebrities with it? This actually came up in a conversation the other day. It was the psychologist I went to see. Said that I should, go online and show my son pictures of, famous people with alopecia. And I'm like, okay, you could do that. But I remembered this article. And I mean, maybe it's different when you're talking about physical appearance, but I thought that he made a really interesting point, because we do tend to do that. And when I was doing this PowerPoint, I thought to put up a list of people, right, with disabilities, and after reading this article, I took it out. Because I agreed with him. What do you think?
I'm disagreeing with that because this morning someone just sent me an article about how television shows are portraying people with autism and how in so many ways it's inaccurate, and in a lot of ways it does a disservice to people who sort of have this expectation that this is how somebody is. Like my son hates the movie Rain Man. He hates that movie because he feels like people see people with autism and think that's what it is.
What does he think about The Good Doctor?
We don't watch these things because he's so upset about portrayals, and he's right, because each autistic person is an individual and they have different challenges.
They addressed this at the Self-Advocacy group at WIHD. They did a presentation on people being depicted in the movies, and we were talking about Leonardo Dicaprio, who ages ago did that What's Eating Gilbert Grape movie.
Yeah.
And I think he won an Academy Award. And the irony was he won an Academy Award for what you probably would discipline kids for doing if they did it in the hallways, right? When you try to parent people with developmental challenges, it's not appropriate. But he did it and got an Academy Award, right? So we were talking about it, and one of the young men with Down syndrome was talking about, they were talking about producers and how it's easier to hire a typical person to portray than to grapple with working with a person with a disability. And they weren't talking about Down syndrome, but which is why it was when the young man with Down syndrome said, I forget what he said, but it was something like, you're not going to play a person with Down syndrome better than me. I'm just like, no, I'm not. And it was kind of interesting. But what this author said, for those of you who didn't get through this article, is that when we reference people with disabilities who have achieved, right? Einstein, we represent people from history who have made great achievements, but they had disabilities, right? The comment the author made was, it's difficult for a 10-year-old child or a 14-year-old child to relate, A, to an adult, but to someone who's like rich and famous. I think the kid would be like, well, sure, if I was him, I'd be fine. But I'm not. I'm 10 years old, I'm sitting in a school, I'm different from everybody else, and that it's hard for them to make that connection, right? So I thought that was a really interesting point.
I just want to say, so for my son, like again, because he doesn't feel like he's that different, so he's like, he'd rather see, himself as Luke Skywalker rather than, the Down syndrome woman who plays on American Horror Story. But when my other kids who are younger, they're in middle school, they're in school here, they like to see that, to be like, it gives them confidence to be like, oh, Ray can do whatever he wants to do. So I think for him, he doesn't see that as the difference, but for other family members and some people can see that, that is helping in some ways.
Right. And that's important too, because it's important for siblings and schoolmates to know that this doesn't mean you can't achieve. Am I done on time? Tips for talking to your child. And again, we sort of talked about a lot of this already, but just to quickly go through them. Check your facts. Okay, that's an important one, because a lot of us think we know all the answers and we don't. Okay? Let a professional help you explain your disability to your child. If you don't really have your head around everything about it or what it might mean, use language and pace appropriate to your child's age or functioning level. That's huge. Huge. I'm not going to sit down with my daughter and start talking to her about chromosomes. Okay? Because it's not going to be, although there was a little coloring book that we used once that actually did explain to her that she had more chromosomes than everybody else. But it has to be meaningful to them. And my suggestion would be talk about the aspects of it that really impact them, because that's what means something to them. If possible, align the disability to differences of others with whom your child is familiar. This one I'm kind of on the fence about, because when I'm struggling with something, I don't like it when people say, oh, you know what I dealt with? And it kind of takes away from what you're struggling with, so be careful with that one. But it is the whole, like, we all have stuff thing, right? Not that anything is worse than anything else, right? But that we all struggle. Focus on strengths and opportunities with concrete examples of what they can do. Emphasize supports, right? We want to teach our kids, especially as they get older and we're not around anymore, how to know where their supports are and how to seek them out. Right? Whether they're natural supports, okay, or actual offices and places where you go. One of the most important reasons why I have insisted that my child be educated with typical peers is because I want her to know how to tell who her friends are. And more importantly, who is not a friend. And that's a struggle, right? Because anyone who knows anything about Down syndrome, they think everybody is their friend. And it doesn't matter how mean you are, it doesn't matter what you've done, she will never reject anyone. And it's a beautiful trait. She will never turn anyone away. There's never anybody she doesn't want to invite to her parties. But she needs to recognize, right? Not that anyone is bad, but that some people are more supportive and more helpful than others. You need to recognize that's one of the key things. So for me, that's a big one. Be honest and be positive. Okay? And if you're anything like me, and this is why I suggest not having like a big serious sit down and it's just kind of casual conversations here and there. If I had a big serious sit down, I'd be a heap of tears because it's too hard. It's too hard. There's a book, I think it's called Bright Eyes. Have you ever read Bright Eyes? It's written by a doctor, a physician who has a daughter with Down syndrome, and it really talks about the progression of how long it took him to really accept and embrace his daughter. It's a really, really good read. And in one part of the book, he talks about she was 19 years old, and he walked by her bedroom, and she was crying in her room, and he went inside, and he was like, what's the matter? And she said, when's it going to go away? I can't even say it without crying, right? And he said, what? When is what going to go away? She said, the Down syndrome. When is it going to go away? You know, now she's 19, right? Now it matters, right? And it's something that as parents, and I think parents of typical kids do it too. It's your baby, right? You don't want anything to hurt your baby. You don't want anything that they can't have or that they can't be. And it's hard. So I probably didn't put it up here, but I probably should have put up here, get all your tears out first before you try to talk to your kid, because it's not helpful for them to see us crying, right? You're going to be fine, really. It's not, you really, you kind of have to, I cry a lot at night, you know, like when they're all in bed and she's not listening, because it never goes away, right? It's not going to go away. All right, I know we're almost out of time. This slide is just focusing on, well, this was a good segue. They're watching you. They're watching how you respond to things. They're watching how you handle difference and how you handle disagreement, right? So think about what you do when you feel like someone's misunderstood you. Do you throw your hands up and walk out of the room? Or do you say, let me try to say it another way? This is huge for my daughter because she has articulation issues, right? And she does get frustrated, but she does try to say it again, right? But if she sees me give up, and I don't even have a speech issue, then why would she try again, right? What do we do when we fail to accomplish what we or others expect? What do we do when we're faced with a challenge? Do we comfortably ask for help? Do we comfortably ask for accommodations? How do we handle misunderstandings with others? Okay, I could go on and on and on, but they're watching us. Okay, do you have road rage issues? Because they're watching you, right? What was that one? Into politics. I don't have any political connection either way, but I remember one ad that was, I think Hillary Clinton put it out, and it basically highlighted different clips off TV of her opponent, and then at the end it just said, our children are watching, right? And it was, it didn't matter which side you were on, it was a powerful ad, and it really made you think, right? And I'm not judging anybody, because I've said and done inappropriate, not okay things too, but my kids are watching, right? Everything you do is okay, right? Your mom, your superhero. All right. So I'm going to jump ahead because I want to. This website, I'm Determined, is a huge, huge website for self-determination for kids with special education programs. Okay, there's a million tools and articles. I suggest you go on there. It's just www.imdetermined.com. Okay, and a lot of the tools that I put in the handouts are taken from that site. There's actually a full PowerPoint on there that you can download or look at that has it's a whole toolkit for self-determination. All right, so now they know who they are, they know how they learn and what they need. So what do we do about the IEPs, right? I feel like I want to come back for part 2 and do this part because I'm going to rush through it, right? But essentially, it's their IEP, right? And once they get to be 15 or 16, what are we talking about? We're talking about what is your adult life going to look like? Are we looking to go to college? Do we need to go to college with supports? Are we going to need to access offices for support, disability support? Are we going to need special programs for non-matriculated students for kids with intellectual disabilities? Right? Are we not going to go to school? Or are we going to pursue a trade? Are we going to go learn a vocational trade? Right? Do we need supported employment? Are we not going to be able to work independently? Do we need community rehabilitation part of the day? Are we able to live independently or not? Okay? Those things have nothing to do with anybody more than they have to do with that kid. That's why they need to be there and they need to be involved, albeit with support, in that discussion. Okay? There's a lot of tools online, not only on I'm Determined, but just online in general. And I'm sure that the administration here could help you too about interest and preference assessments, right? Trying to figure out, depending on how communicative your child is, what are they really interested in? What are their preferences? What would make sense for them, right? If you're not an incredibly social person and you don't really like social interaction that much and you're not comfortable with it, it probably doesn't make sense to pursue a job working at the front desk of a gym, where you're going to have to say hello and greet 1,000 people a day. It's not really, doesn't really make sense, right? I always use the example of a kid who's the top of his class, who probably could end up in Georgetown Medical School, but if he passes out and vomits every time he sees a scratch on his finger, that's probably not a smart hack, right? So this planning, this consideration of what makes sense, we do it whether we have a disability or not. What makes sense for this person? So this is called a one-pager, and if you go on I'm Determined, they have them at different levels, everything from kindergarten level, where the kid's actually drawing pictures, up to career level. Okay, this is sort of middle of the road. And the purpose of the one-pager is that your child can walk into any class or CSC meeting and say, this is me, right? In a nutshell, these are my strengths, these are my interests, these are my preferences, and this is what I need, right? Probably should put a big highlight on that bottom. This is what I need. So that the teachers will know it's not really fair for me to give this kid complex math problems if I don't give him a visual checklist, right? If I don't give him a multiplication table, he doesn't know his multiplication facts. If I don't give him a calculator, whatever it is that the CSE has determined that this child needs. My daughter still has a number line on the bottom of every paper she gets in math, because she can't do that now. You ask her to add 6 and 7, she needs the number line. And even then, she loses count. But at least with the number line, she knows what to do, right? So that's one tool. This is also off of I'm Determined. It's called a good day plan. And this is your son or daughter thinking through. We did this the other day with my daughter because the teacher said to me she has had, it was like 7 school days consecutively where it was just like stellar. There were no blips, there were no issues. And I said, Jess, what do you think it is? What's doing it? What is giving you these good days, right? She's a horrible sleeper, so it's not good sleep because she's up all night. We thought it was fatigue. No, that's not it, because she's had 7 consecutive perfect days and has had me up all night. So it's not good sleep. We're trying to figure it out. So this is a tool to help you figure out, what do I need to have a good day, right? Is it the days mom makes me breakfast? Is it the days where I did my homework the night before and I'm not scrambling in the morning? So this is a visual tool to help you figure out your good day. Goal plans. These are tools for kids getting ready for the next year, right? You can't really see them too good, but I think I handed these out to you. Did you get these in the handouts? right? So it's basically talking about what are the goals, what do I need to get there, right? And who can help me get there? What are the supports that I need to help me get there? Right, so this is a great website. I really suggest you use it. Okay, our website has 3 tools on it. One is your parent-student worksheet, which is a back and front that you got in your packet. And it's something you can fill out as you're heading into your program review or your annual review. And it basically walks you through what are the goals, what do we need to get there, what supports do we need, what's holding this kid back, right? If you don't do that homework and plan ahead before you sit down at that meeting, you just sit there, right, and you get angry because all you hear is negative. All you hear is what your kid can't do, right? You need to turn that around, right? And you need to say, could you tell me what some of my son's strengths are so that I can build him up and I can build a positive plan for him, right? And then you'll hear it. And I shouldn't say that. Some teachers are really good about it. I have one speech therapist who for 10 years now, well, not 10 years, I'm exaggerating, she's been in school for 10 years, 6 or 7 years. Everything she says is positive, right? She seems to understand that I don't need her to explain to me that my child has an intellectual disability. I'm already aware of that. I just need to hear how she's doing. And she actually talks about how great she's doing, right? So when she came in, I forget, it was like 4th grade, and she said, you know, I just have to say that your daughter's utterances from last year, she is speaking in long sentences with details, and she can take me through how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And that's huge, because last year, she could only blurt out, you know, the ingredients, and, you know, there was no sequence. She said, I say that first because when we assess our children on speech, she's pitted up against her chronological peers, right? So her speech levels actually dropped. It looks like she's doing worse, but she's not. And there's a professional who explained that to me. She said, I don't even want you to focus on that because she's doing so amazing. She's made so much progress. It's just not amazing for a typical kid, right? Who probably could have done that for you at age 5. Right? So there's somebody who really gets it and is going to focus on the positive, but not everyone has that makeup, right? So you have to ask for it and then you'll get it, right? So that's your student-parent worksheet. It is available on our website, English and Spanish. If you need any help getting any of these tools, please call me in my office. Okay, also on the table when you walked in is the Student Plain Language IEP form. If you've ever been to any of my other presentations, I probably handed out the parent one. This is the exact same tool, but the blue font is written in a little bit simpler terms for a young adult to understand. And what happens is, just like you did on the parent version, they go through it. They can either write in, or there's one you can type in, what they feel should go into each section of that IEP. And they bring that with them to the IEP meeting. Bobby, do you have anything you wanted to add or anything you wanted to say? Yes, I did, because when you talked about social development, we didn't talk about the fact that I don't really have any friends and I need some help in that area. Now, I don't know if that's something that your son or anybody else would be comfortable to say, but with our support, when they understand that that CSC meeting, the purpose of it is to optimize their academic achievement and their successes at school, and that includes social engagement. And once they understand that, they might be able to have a candid conversation with you about what might help. There might be a particular kid that they take a liking to and they're comfortable with. And maybe the team could explore some kind of a peer support situation. You know, not everything is already established. Sometimes you have to ask, can we do this? Right? And the answer is obviously dependent on the circumstances and what's available, but we don't get if we don't ask, right? Okay, and the draft IEP interactive tool, if your kids are anything like mine, everything becomes much more interesting once you put it on the computer. So this is a means by which a child is prompted through a series of questions, at the end of which all of their responses are plugged into the appropriate places on the IEP form, and you can print out essentially Bobby's IEP. If he was going to write his own IEP, this is it. And you bring that with you to the meeting, right, along with Bobby. So you can see what's on the right-hand side of the screen here is the printed out version, or at least a portion of it. So under academic achievement, instead of a bunch of data, right, and numbers that we don't understand. It says, my easiest class is art. I'm good at this because I like it. I enjoy drawing. My hardest class is English, and this is hard because I hate writing. No, I hate reading. Whatever it is. Student strengths. The way I learn best is when the teacher talks slow and I'm doing experiments. Outside of my classes, I'm good at sports. What I like most about school is recess and home and careers. And the subject that is most interesting to me is science. That's really important. That's really important. Because if his most interesting class is science, then let's not put him in extra classes of, English literature if he doesn't need it. Let's put him in classes that are interesting to him. So really what all of these tools are for, depending on your kid, you're going to have to pick and choose what the best tools are to get him to interact. Maybe none of these tools work for them. Maybe they just want to talk to you. Maybe they want you to do the talking. Of course, we need to move toward the self-advocacy piece, but wherever your kid is in this journey, it's our job as mom and dad to support them wherever they are and help them to learn that this is your journey, not mine. Right? I might think that my daughter would be a great in the restaurant business, right? As a hostess, as a waitress. Right? She could do it. She could do it independently. She's social. But she might want to go work in a school because she loves little kids. Right? As an adult, I can think of a million different complications with that, but that's what she wants. And if that's what she wants to pursue, then I am going to help her figure out what parts of that she can and can't do. I'm going to explain to her, if you want to become a classroom teacher, this is what it looks like, and this is what kind of work it involves, and most importantly, this is the academics you have to do to get there. Right? Do you think you can do that? You're not going to have an IEP, you're not going to have your helper in college, and I'm not going to be there. Right? And then the conversation's about the diplomas, right? I don't even know if we're going to go to college. We're certainly not one where you can get a teaching degree, so let's talk about what other jobs we can do where we're teaching little kids. Can we be an assistant? Right? Can we work in food services in an elementary school? I mean, it's really about exploring what does your kid want to do and why do they want to do it? Right? Does he want to be a police officer because he wants to be a police officer? Or does he want to be a police officer because he thinks the uniform's really cool? Does he want to be an airplane pilot because he wants to be a pilot? Because that's not happening. Or does he want to be a pilot because he thinks the cockpit's really cool because there's a lot of different buttons and levers? Because we could go learn how to be a DJ too, right? It's about really figuring out who we are. Not we, they. Helping them to figure out who they are and what they really want. And how can we make it happen, or how can we come close, right? A lot of this I feel like is, I go back to that assignment I had to do when I was a little girl, right? We don't all get what we wanted. Like, that's not really how life works, right? So maybe you can't be what you wanted to be. I never got to be a solid gold dancer. It really causes me upset. But you know what? I had a pretty great life, right? And I say that, of course, joking now, but trust me, when I was 16, I wanted to be a solid gold dancer. I really did. And it's kind of, I think in education now, I think it's a good thing. We're talking to our kids about what they want to do and what their path is much earlier. No one ever had that conversation with me when I was in high school. It was just, what schools do you want to go to, right? Where'd your sister go? Which logo do you like? I don't know. I didn't research colleges with any kind of thinking of who I was or what I wanted to do at all. It was like, where do they have a big Greek life, right? Where do they have the nicest dorms? It was never, what are the courses of study they have there, and is that what I want? I don't know, maybe that was just me, but I feel like we do a much better job now of starting those conversations early, even for our typical kids. And it's not really any different, even for our lowest functioning kids with disabilities. There needs to be a discussion about who we are and where we're going, right? And it's hard as moms to support that.
And that you can change.
And that you can change. Oh my goodness. I went to court every day for 20 years before I did this job, right? That's right, you can change. So the positive outcomes of self-awareness are acceptance, self-advocacy, and independence. All right? The alternative is to not be self-aware. Just keep believing that we're just like everyone else. Be uncomfortable and feel invisible. Right? And the only person we're hurting is ourselves when we do that. And the same goes true for our kids.